Hi all, and welcome to this week's edition of A Slice of History with the Butterfly Princess. This week I'm reading you an article about the Marco Polo's adventures. This article has been published in the January 2025 edition of the BBC History magazine. This article has also been written by a gentleman called Peter Jackson, who is an Emeritus Professor of Medieval History at Keele University. So this is the article I'm going to read to you this week for the episode for this week's edition of the Extra Slice of History, A Slice of History of the Butterfly Princess. Right, so life had taken a turn for the worse for Ricciardo of Pisa. In the dying days of the 13th century, the Italian Romance writer found himself locked up as a prisoner of war. Over the previous years, Ruscario had made something of a name for himself as the first author to pen an Athenian romance in Italian. Yet he got himself captured while fighting for his native city in the Pisan War, and so here he was, denied his freedom, languishing in a Genoese jail. Yet if Richarlison was searching for some sort of salvation, he didn't have to look far. It lay in the identity of a curious individual with whom he shared his self. The man began telling Rosario an extraordinary story. It was a tale of an epic journey to China, of encounters with unimaginable, rich and powerful rulers of strange and exotic lands, and brushes with creatures that would make your heart race and skin crawl. And it was triggered in Rosario as an idea. The Italian writer soon saw the potential of turning the memories of his well-travelled cellmates into a book, and so he set about writing them up in the default language of medieval romance, Old French, but with a smarting of Italian. The result, Travels of Marco Polo, are diverse parts of the world, as it was originally known, was Rosario's crowning achievement, and it would turn his cellmate Marco Polo into one of the most famous figures of the entire Middle Ages. Strange New World. 1 minute. Travels of Marco Polo transformed perceptions of the Far East across medieval Europe, including generations of readers to a world that they could barely conceive of, yet above visit. But look beyond its remarkable impact and how much credence should we give to a text of Richarlison's committed to paper following his incarceration with Polo. How useful is the book in understanding life in Asia, especially China in the Middle Ages? In short, can we really trust Marco Polo's word? To answer this question, we need to untangle what kind of book it was. It meant was the same. What was it? What's same today? At its heart is the tale of how in the early 1270s, at the age of just 17, Marco embarked on an extraordinary journey to China with two other Polos, his father Napoleon and his uncle Maffeo. The trio saw the book tells us travelled to the Far East at the end of the superlative period of imperial expansion triggered by the rise of the great Mongol leader Genghis Khan. So formidable was Genghis as both a warlord and a conqueror that the empire he established would at its peak extend all the way from Eastern Europe to the Sea of Japan. However, by the time Marco and his companions arrived at the sea, the Mongol Empire split into a number of virtual autonomous states, and at the age of rapid expansion was all but over. Only to the east, in the domination of Genghis's grandson, the Great Khan, where major wars were conquered, being fought notably when in 1279 extinguished the rule of southern China's Song Dynasty emperors. Sadly, the original text describing the world that greeted Marco and his companions on their arrival to China is lost, but there's enough consistency between the various manuscripts to indicate that what we're reading is essentially the same book. However, this is not necessarily the book you might expect. For all that its English title talks of Polo's travels, it's emphatical not a travel log. Rather, it is a description of the known world based loosely around Marco's experiences. As depictions go, it's often an unsatisfactory one. The text is rambling and disruptive. It is also given to artificial changes of direction, such as when it embarks on a description of the Black Sea, before having recalled that Marco has already given an account of this, heading off abruptly in another direction. There are other irrational, despite repeatedly promising to confine himself to describing lands he had seen and to distinguish personal observations from heresy. The book includes regions such as the coast of East Africa. That it's highly unlikely Marco ever visited. For the most part, there is little sense of an itinerary, and yet, despite these limitations, there are extraordinary details to be found. The book states that having arrived at the court of Marco swiftly made 1 minute. Marco swiftly made favourable impressions on the Mongol ruler, who recruited him into his service. The Great Khan apparently dispatched Marco as his representative on missions within China in a number of cases around the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. The Vatican was often charged with securing extra collections such as the arms bows of the Boudica and drafting interesting reports on the after drafting interesting reports on these journeys. Marco's account of his interactions with the Great Khan are remarkable, yet arguably more astonishing to his contemporaries were his descriptions of the marvels he had witnessed on his travels. Some of these are undoubtedly in the tradition of the fantastic tales, for example, the giant bird called the Rook, which could drop elephants from a great height. Many others, however, use extravagation and explore the remarkable within nature, rather than imply pure fabrication. So we read of a king of Champa, the southern part of present-day Vietnam, who has 326 children, and of a giant ruby in the possession of a king of a jewel Marco allegedly saw firsthand. Marco also describes huge Chinese ships and invites us to marvel at the enormous populations of Chinese cities, not to mention the vast number of islands to be found in the Indian Ocean and the China Sea. The book sings the praises of a great island lying due east of China, named which absorbs in gold and pearls. That island is now known as Japan, and Marco's book was the earliest Western source to mention it. Marco seems to take a positive pleasure in demoralising common misconceptions about the East back in Western Europe. The mythical salamander is, he explains, not a living, breathing creature, but abstinence, an incredible substance mined from earth. The corpses sold in India as dead pilgrims are in fact dried monkeys. The unicorn is identified as not at all the kind of creature the book assures us, but allows itself to be ensnared by virgins, riding to the rescue. So Marco witnessed extraordinary sights on his travels, and he was also happy to share them with his readership. Yet, to return to the question I posed earlier, can we trust Marco's word? When he lectured his fellow Europeans of the insight of life in the Far East, how far was he dipping into the well of lived experience, and how much was make-believe? Certain details in the book are undeniably questionable on historical grounds. Prominent among those is the claim that the Polos recorded invaluable assistances to forces in the capture of the city of a city. This is known to have occurred in 1273, a year or two prior to the Vietnamese arrival in China. In fact, Chinese sources give Muslim siege experts the credit for assisting covert assaults on the city. This is not the only passage that stretches credibility to China. In the early 1260s, and the book tells us that during the first visit, they had been commissioned to bring back to China 100 Christian missionaries, together with some holy oil from Jerusalem. The book also claims that Pope Gregory appointed the Popes as ambassadors to the Mongol Kingdom in Iran following a meeting in Ankara. Both are great stories, neither is likely to be true. Many historians have also questioned the credibility of Marco's co-author, who is known from his other writings to have been a Herbert name dropper, once claiming, for example, that the Lord Edward, the future King Edward I of England, had lent him a book of Arthurian romance. Such scepticism has a long history. The book started making waves across Western Europe from as early as the second decade in the 14th century, and it wasn't long before rave reviews were being counterbalanced by the voicing of doubts. In particular, Marco's contemporaries seem to have struggled with the contrast between the received images of the Mongol, a people customary portrayed in the 13th century. Europe is nomadic barbarians, and the book's descriptions of the wealth and oppressive organisation. In short, well, Europeans could accept the existence of a sophisticated polity in the East, the idea that it was presided over by the Mongols was far more difficult to swallow. Europeans were also willing to lap up the fictional story of the Christian king priest John, who, according to the tradition, our legend, ruled over a kingdom in the East. 1 minute. In the East, however, the version of Prester John's life in the book, which described him as a minor prince overthrown by Genghis Khan with the help of astrologicals, was much less to their liking. Modern critics are more troubled by what seemed like glaring from the Venetian text than his descriptions of the Mongols. Marco's failure to mention the Great Wall shouldn't be held against him, because, contrary to popular belief, this continuous structure that exists today has not yet been built, but it is more difficult to account for the silence regarding tea drinking, the use of fingerprinting for altercation of documents, of the way Chinese women bound bare feet. Other critics have pointed to the fact that although Marco is at great pains to depict himself as a highly valued agent for the Great Khan, no reference to him has been found in Chinese sources. In the eyes of some modern academics, such ammunitions fundamentally undermine Marco's entire story. One has even gone as far as to claim that he never made it further east than the Black Sea. Do I agree with this assessment? No. In my opinion, there is nothing interestingly improbable about a Venetian finding employment in China under the Great Khan, who is known to have recruited men of diverse talents to serve him. In fact, this seems to have been a trait of Mongol rulers. By 1289, the Ilkyns were employing Italians as envoys, interpreters, and merchants. Marco's maritime voyages on the Great Khan's behalf fits easily within the bust of diplomatic activity that took Campbell's to Sri Lanka through India between 1278 and 1294. One explanation for the Polo's absence from Chinese sources is that they would simply have been classed in the same category as all the many other foreign agents drawn from lands to the west of China. So numerous were these visitors that the Chinese had two terms for them: Westerners, or people of various nations. What of the accusation that Marco grossly inflated the role he played in recording his adventures? Even his most vigorous of defenders would have to concede that it's highly likely that he did both. Yet he'd hardly have been the first traveller to be guilty of such a crime. This doesn't mean that he didn't have any adventures at all. Maybe the best way to make any significant headway in the quest to determine the veracity of Marco's writing is to locate documentary evidence to support his presence in the Mongol world. Unfortunately, this is in vanishingly short supply. Marco's later life, in which he became a successful merchant, is well documented, but film proof of his travels remain elusive. In fact, the nearest we get to a documentary evidence is his uncle's Matthias will. This refers to the 3 tables of gold that were from the magnificent Chang of the Tartans, a term that could mean either the Great Khan or one of his relatives. It is presumably one of those tablets that is mentioned in an inventory of Marco's property drawn up decades after his death during a dispute among his notorious kinfolk, blazing a trail. Ultimately, given these difficulties of the sources and the doubt swirling around Marco's accounts, perhaps we have to make an admission that the most remarkable thing about the Polo's travels is not so much that they happened, but when they happened. The long journey to China fell several years before an Italian presence in Asia is even documented. It would be up to 30 years before the great age of Italian settlement in China's coastal cities would get underway. That makes the Polo's true pioneers. In the 13th century, Venetian and Genoese traders established footholds in Crimea and the chief camp cities of Mongol princes in Iran and in the western steppes. Yet no one ventured near it as far east as Marco and his 2 relatives. Is it any wonder that the generations of Western Europeans read his accounts of his travels with slop-jaw wonder? Excuse me. As the 14th century went on, European voyages to China began to decline, when in 1368, a native Ming dynasty, less ready to welcome foreign merchants, kicked out the Mongol rulers from China. But the Western imagination never lost sight of the image of a fabulously wealthy empire lying to the east. When Christopher Columbus embarked on his transatlantic journeys in the 1490s, which led to the discovery of the New World, he was seeking an alternative route to Cathay before he boarded his ship on one of his famous voyages. Columbus packed an indispensable guide. It was a copy of Marco Polo's book, and I would just like to read you a timeline of Marco Polo's life, just to add a bit more of a perspective on what we're talking about. So, Marco Polo's life in travels. In 1254, Marco Polo is born in Venice to a wealthy merchant. His mother dies when he is young and he is raised by extended family. 1269. Marco's father, Nico, and Uncle Maffeo, both merchants, returned to Venice, having visited the court of the Mongol leader Kublai Khan. 1271. Nicola set out on a new expedition. It's believed that their journey takes them through Iran, Afghanistan, and on to China. 1275. According to Marco's account of his travels, the Poles arrived at Kublai Khan's summer capital in modern-day northeastern China. 1275 to 1292. In Marco's words, he is appointed to serve as Kublai's foreign ambassador and spends the next 17 years travelling extensively across China. In 1292, the Polos escort a Mongol princess to Persia, visiting modern-day Vietnam and Sri Lanka en route. They eventually returned to Venice. 1298. Marco was captured by Venice's enemies in Genoa. His cellmate in Norfolk begins writing up and embellishing Marco's memoirs. 1300. Copies of the book, The Travels of Marco Polo. It will help make Marco arguably the most celebrated explorer of the Middle Ages. And on the 8th of January 1324, after living out the final years of his life in his native Venice, Marco Polo then dies. So that concludes this week's edition of a slice of history with the Butterfly Princess. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye for now.